one of the saddest stories of a god in solo leveling. His story really puts into perspective that the monarchs aren't really the bad guys we believe them to be. I'm talking about Sillad, the Frost Monarch. He's the king of the snowfolk, an elf with blue skin, long silver hair, and pure white eyes. Unlike some of the other monarchs, he actually doesn't really yearn for battle or hungers for the destruction of other lesser races. In fact, as callous as his design might seem, during the Jeju Island arc, he chose to knock out some humans he encountered instead of massacring them, which would have been easier if I'm being real here. So why would an evil monarch representing the dark aspects of the universe do this? Well, everything to Sillad is about the true ops being the Iterumbris, and it all has to do with his backstory before becoming a monarch, which is explored in the Ragnarok novel. Sillad's rise to the title of Frost was not an immediate ascension, rather a transformation driven by survival and revenge for his people. He was originally an elf from the Elvenwood, an ancient civilization and dimension where the snowfolks and elves reside, until one day the great calamity happened. Unlike the seasons of Earth, the 4 seasons in this frost plane did not last a fixed period. Some seasons were brief, while others could last decades or even centuries. However, winter always arrived suddenly and without warning, bringing catastrophic consequences. When winter came, it was not just a change in weather, it was an event called the Year of Harvest. Basically, Elvenwood, the massive spirit tree and forest that supported the elves, was a double-edged sword. While it provided an optimal environment for them and made their spirit magic stronger, it absorbed all the nutrients from the land, and when the land became barren, the tree turned on its inhabitants. During the Year of the Harvest, Elvenwood captured and drained the elves, absorbing them as emergency food. Even the spirits abandoned them, siding with the tree instead of their former allies. Sillad, as an infant, experienced this firsthand. His mother tried to escape with him as the Elvenwood began its harvest, but she was caught by the tree's roots and drained of life. Sillad survived, but he lost everything. His mother's final words to him were literally, "Live." So he grew up in a new village that had fled from the calamity, but he never smiled, carrying the memory of his mother's death. Most elves accepted this cycle as inevitable. Even the ones who barely survived winter would just plant the seeds of Elvenwood in new lands, ensuring the next generation would fall victim to the same fate. It was just a way of life for the elves. And we see this with Sillad's best friend, Fors, who chose to flee the next calamity rather than fight. However, Sillad, being the Sigma he is, refused to be a little bitch. He was the only one who did not run away when the next cycle of winter came. Instead of accepting the fate of an elf, he embraced the cold itself through devouring the remains of the frozen Elvenwood and incorporating its essence into his body, which evolved him into the first ice elf. And after a while, the previous monarch of Frost had just died in the Great War against the rulers. So the dark aspect of Frost ended up choosing Sillad, giving birth to a new monarch that rules the cold and the spirits. Even after ascending though, Sillad's hatred did not fade. He blamed Elvenwood for its weakness and sought to erase its legacy. Once he gained more power, he ordered the destruction of all remaining Elvenwood trees and led his new ice elf people into a harsher frozen existence. He could never yield to the forces that killed his mother. Sillad learned the truth of the universe, that everything him and his people had gone through for eons was all for the entertainment of this universe's absolute being. So he joined forces to uproot this accursed system of violence and despair, just like he uprooted the cycle of the Elvenwood for his people. However, during this war, he would inevitably be killed by the Shadow Monarch, who himself was protecting his home and people. This war against the rulers was devastating for the Ice Elves, and after Sillad's death, their entire race was threatened to extinction. extinction because all the capable fighters were being taken to the battlefield to fight. Every elf old enough to hold a bow was drafted. As a result, the only ice elves who survived were children, young ones, and a few remaining elders. This left the village without strong warriors to defend it, making them easy prey for other dangers, such as the Echo Forest spirits, a powerful and malevolent force that had once remained isolated. Suddenly, it went on a rampage and attacked their village, which is most likely due to the new war occurring in outer space against the gods of other universes that Jinwoo is fighting. This further decimated their already weakened population. Most of the remaining adult ice elves were slaughtered, leaving behind only a handful of survivors, mostly young elves. Fortunately, Cha-hain was thrown into the ice elves' territory by accident while riding Kaisel. Though initially just trying to survive in this frozen land, she soon found herself involved in their plight. When the Echo Forest spirits attacked, she single-handedly fought them off, saving the village. The ice elves, in all of her power, began calling her their savior and built ice sculptures in her honor. After the battle, she stayed with them and taught them swordsmanship, helping them become strong enough to defend themselves, being heralded as their new mother. Despite Cha-hain's help, the ice elves had lost much of their former power. Where once they had warriors who could rival A-class hunters, now even their strongest members barely reached B-class, with most being D or lower. Sillad, despite long dead, was aware of what had happened to his people. Seeing his proud race reduced to weak survivors who had to be protected by a human was deeply humiliating for him. However, over time his feelings changed from shame to gratitude for Jinwoo and his family, as he understood Jinwoo's circumstances were the same as his, that the true enemy are the Eatrums. Like if Cha-hain didn't spend 5 years helping the Ice Elves, Sillad would have likely killed Suho when he ventured into the Elvenwood during the Glacier Dungeon arc. Throughout the novel, Sillad is often used as a direct phone line between Suho and his mother. How is this possible? Well, Suho took one of Sillad's descendants, Circa, into his party, and while she prayed, she could talk to Sillad, whom after dying was in the sea after death. This very descendant would then become the next Frost Monarch. Circa was born an ice elf. Unlike Sillad though, who had to struggle against the cold to become the monarch, Circa was born into it. For her, winter was not a threat, it was all she had ever known. Her strength was not immediately evident though, as she was still young and inexperienced. However, she had the potential to control the very spirits of the cold themselves, just like Sillad once did. Recognizing this spiritual control, Sillad chose Circa as his rightful successor. Her true strength and power of the Frost Monarch was at full display against one of the strongest enemies in solo leveling Ragnarok, an apostle of the Eatrum known as the Apostle of Nightmares, which I'll discuss more about later on. This being sucked Circa into his nightmare realm, having her fight the dark elf doppelganger of herself. This dark elf declared that Circa was too weak to handle the power of the Frost Monarch. It wanted this ability for himself. As it poured down a stream of nightmares into Circa, fanning her insecurities that she couldn't take on the responsibilities chosen for her by her ancestor and Lord Sillad, it started to overwhelm her. She realized that this entity wanted to turn her into another version of the Elvenwood, a puppet which the Eatrums can control against Jinwoo and Suho. Just when all seemed lost, a final ice arrow from the nightmare struck her leg, wounding her and making her escape nearly impossible. She was seconds away from losing herself completely, but then Sillad's voice called out to Circa, reminding her of who she was and what she was fighting for, which gave her enough time to live until Sung Suho broke through the illusion and reached out to her. As Circa grasped his hand, her connection to the Frost Monarch's power reignited. In her hands, the Ice Tree Spear materialized, its frosty light cutting through the darkness of the Apostle. The spear immediately amplified her control over the spirits of winter, allowing her to fight back against the nightmare corruption. submission. With the Ice Tree Spear, Circa no longer had to fight against winter. She became winter itself. Instead of being consumed by the spirits, she took control of them, freezing and absorbing them into her own power. Using her new spirit armor, she pummeled the Apostle of Nightmare into submission, wielding her spear as a hammer and shattering its form. With a final strike, Circa completely silenced the Nightmare and proved herself as the true Frost Monarch. Of course, Suho had to help completely defeat the Nightmare Apostle, but you know, she helped. She became the Monarch, similar to Eso, who became the next Demon Monarch only through the help of Suho. Circa couldn't have done so without his encouragement and Suho nullifying the Nightmare's power long enough for Circa to wield the Frost Monarch's abilities. So she too has bowed down to Suho. Bro is collecting the Monarch descendants like they are freaking Pokemon, okay? In fact, Suho has the Blessing of the Cold attribute, which gives him massive resistance to ice-based attacks and isn't even bothered by the cold. And if you guys want to learn about how strong guilds are in the solo leveling universe, and I even talk about some Ragnarok guilds, go watch the video showing on screen right now.